BookTube. I once again have a mail haul to show you that does not include any books. We did this just recently. I had a mail haul in which we managed to make it all the way through the video without ever unpackaging a book. And that is going to be true this time too. I don't know if more mail is coming today, but I wanted to announce it up front in case there are a whole bunch of you who don't want to watch other than books being open. Instead, I want to revisit something that a periodical that I mentioned the other day. I want to visit a new periodical, and I want to open a box that I know is not a book. Although, it is book related. Pretty much everything in my life except Her Highness is book related, and Her Highness is not happy right now. She is not happy because that window is closed. It's not just that the curtain is down, the window is closed. All the windows are closed because, ooh, googly moogly, is it hot. And in the morning, it's perfectly fine to have cross breezes running through the house to swap out the stale air of the night and whatnot. But once the sun starts hitting the house, once the unobstructed heat starts being outside, in other words, once it's hotter, if you open a window and it's noticeably hotter outside, you can just feel that it's hotter outside than it is inside, then close the window again until that isn't true. So there reached a point where I had to close that window, and she doesn't like that at all, and she's not going to like going on our walk either. We have a long walk to do, and it can't be long. She expects it, but it can't be long. But anyway, the box is bookish, and we'll get to that. But first, I want to deal with the periodicals. And first, we'll deal with the revisit, the thing that I didn't talk about last time. I got an issue of The Atlantic, and I talked about some of the things that were in there, $1,000 pairs of junk shoes made of cardboard, for instance. But I didn't talk about something literary, and I don't know why. So that issue is now long gone. I clipped out the thing I wanted to keep it. This is an infuriating, I guess, editorial, opinion piece, whatever it is. It's by Emily Gould, the writer, the novelist Emily Gould, and it's called Dear John. The subtitle is Literary Stardom Ain't What It Used to Be, and it's about the three Jonathans. Jonathan Franzen, Jonathan Latham, and Jonathan Safran Foer, who she is constructing here as a kind of holy trinity of white male entitlement in the American book market, and she's examining that market. The opening is, time was, if you read books, you'd be hard-pressed to escape the Jonathans. Franzen, Latham, Safran Foer, white American men hewing to a mid-century model of novelist as public intellectual. And she goes on to describe, she's describing that era, which is actually very recent. That's just 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But she also gives a thumbnail of allegedly more distant era that goes like this. Modern American book publishing began to take shape in the early 1900s. Highly educated, overwhelmingly male editors and agents did handshake deals over 3 martini lunches at the Century Club, then went back to the office and sexually harassed their secretaries. This continued until 2 weeks ago, or maybe the late 90s and early aughts, when Bertelsmann bought Random House, Viacom took control of Simon & Schuster, and publishing started acting slightly more like a corporate industry, and then a perpetual Yale reunion. And that was infuriating to read on a number of different levels, but mainly because it's just factually wrong. It's the kind of stupid Twitter-style reduction of history that is designed to get clicks. But this is a long piece in an issue, in the middle of an issue of Vanity Fair. So is it expected to get clicks? Is this? I'm not expecting that anybody who writes contemporary fiction in America today has 2 brain cells to rub together. I am expecting instead that they are extremely entitled and pampered, full-bred poodles who've never been given a crossword in their life and who have only been cushioned against anything like actual critical, analysis of their work. But that thumbnail is just dumb. I mean, it operates in an alternate reality in which we don't have any memoirs from any of the women who were actually involved in publishing up until, what was it, about 2 minutes ago. In other words, when Emily Gould showed up on the scene. In other words, when Twitter showed up on the scene. There isn't any actual history before Twitter and before your own account on Twitter. Instead, there's just these easy offhand things. Aren't men awful? Wasn't the past terrible? Isn't everybody glad that I'm here? We do have plenty of memoirs. Those publishing houses, sure, there was sexual harassment. They were populated from top to bottom with a kind of human I'm going to describe, it once had a word that described it. In the 21st century, you're going to have to Google this word. I'm sure that Emily Gould has no idea what it means, and has probably never encountered it before. The word was adult. Once upon a time, there was a word called adult, where adults would come together in a workplace. Since humans are great apes, they're going to be together in a workplace for maybe 5 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, before, if they're relatively comfortable with each other, sexual innuendos start to happen. And I'm not saying that all the sexual harassment that happened was playful, but there was plenty of it that was. We're whitewashing it now. Now, the fact that white men have existed in any way in public society is a kind of ongoing, articulated crime in public. But we have memoirs from everyone involved in a lot of these publishing houses that existed up until 2 minutes ago. And they weren't, Dickensian hell houses of nonstop sexual harassment. Not to mention the fact that this stupid, easy, snide, idiotic Twitter summary, what it says about all the women who had positions of power at the time. We have a lot of memoirs from them as well, and what are you saying about them? But one way or another, I thought, from this kind of ridiculous, snide Twitter virtue signaling, that at the very least, Emily Gould and I would agree about the Jonathans. And we don't. Amazingly, we don't. I have no idea what this means. I am assuming that this comes mainly from quasi-romantic flirting at parties, about which I know nothing. But she concludes with the odd man out is Franzen, whose collaboration with Noah Baumbach on Corrections miniseries was killed by HBO in 2012 after shooting part of the pilot. Luckily, he is the only Jonathan still wholly vested in writing enormous, risky novels. Crossroads, his newest out this fall from FSG, is the first in a planned trilogy. In the announcement, his publisher deemed Franzen, quote, universally recognized, ... leading novelist of his generation, close quote. Twitter lost its mind. But I defy even his staunchest haters to read this symphonic intergenerational saga and disagree. I've read this symphonic intergenerational saga. I firmly disagree. Anyway, this is the problem with dismissing the Jonathans. Franzen, at least, is really great. No, he's not. I don't know what's going on in Emily Gould's private life that would lead her to make him, of all people, the exception. I would argue that of the 3 Jonathans that she nominates, Jonathan Safran Foer is the only one who has actually demonstrated on the page anything remotely approaching literary talent. His nonfiction, this is Franzen we're talking about, his nonfiction is pessimistic and snobby. In other words, Emily Gould doesn't like it. But his fiction is passionately inclusive. Oh my God. Imagine having, well, can I say the balls? Even though Emily Gould doesn't have any, can I say the sheer chutzpah to use a 21st century Twitter shibboleth like inclusion with an author like Jonathan Franzen? His main trick, which never gets old, is to reveal his characters' inner lives at the moment of their most visceral humanity. He follows them into the bathroom and the bedroom and confessional, and we all emerge together, exalted and disgusted. Have you ever heard such crap in your life? We all emerge from that confessional together, exalted and exhausted. Latham and Chabon, Michael Chabon, also have their moments, but their early aughts books feel musty now. Do they really? Do their early aughts books feel musty now? Emily Gould. So you have under your belt a book as good as The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, Yiddish Policeman's Union. You have a book as good as that, probably more than one, right? It's, in fact, kind of easy for you to write that kind of thing. And early Franzen doesn't feel musty. The Corrections, speaking of early Franzen, holds up. A 2001 hit that bangs as hard as This Is It. I have no idea what This Is It is, but The Corrections is awful. It's punishment to read. If you're trying to write a sprawling, ambitious book with dozens of vividly drawn characters, you could do worse than use it as a model. But why would you want to do that? Writing novels is for suckers! Exclamation point. This is a rhetorical trick that I see a lot. I have to confess here, I know that it's going to sound terrible, but those of you who've been watching this channel will know that at least I've done the homework. I've actually done the reading to back it up. My first off-the-cuff impression is that this kind of trick is only done by women. Young women. women who were children in 2001. And it is to make all sorts of dumb points, summarize all sorts of complex history in which women played a part, wrong, summarize it wrong, and then make some sort of point that contradicts the original point that you made, and then at the end write it all off with a kind of a giggle, kind of an emoticon giggle, where it doesn't really matter anyway, right? I only read the introductions to great books. I don't read the great books themselves. Or what about this color? Isn't this color interesting? Well, it's kind of a silly topic. But then again, aren't all topics silly? And scene. And the obvious response is no. All topics aren't silly. All you've proven in this, you haven't invalidated everything written by anyone other than you before you wrote this piece, which I'm sure you think you have. Instead, all you've done is confirm that you're a bit of a nitwit, and that maybe your editor should have taken a stronger look at your copy, or maybe not taken a stronger look at it and thought, well, she's got a fan base, so we'll run it. One way or another. I can't believe that it has the illustrations like this, Dear John. I can't believe that I didn't rail about this when I first got the issue. But then we have the greatest literary review in the English-speaking world, the TLS, which I would ordinarily take you to for the letters page. Sometimes there are dust-ups in the letters page. Right now there are a couple of ongoing dust-ups going on, but they're a bit on the dull side, even for this channel. And sometimes I'll take you to the NB column in the back, where sometimes the author can intentionally try to rabble-rouse. Nothing really hit the spot this time around. Instead, the rabble-rousing, the controversial thing, isn't intended to be. It's the editors of the TLS saying, we know this is controversial, but we're going to do it anyway. Not because of clicks and traffic, but because we view it as part of our remit. I think that's absolutely fascinating. And the thing I'm talking about is the first review in this issue. The first and by far the longest review. This is the showcase review of this issue. The review is by Patricia Williams, and it is a review of Facing Reality, the new book by Charles Murray, one of the co-authors of The Bell Curve, an absolute pariah in 21st century intellectual circles. I would have assumed that if he had a new book, the TLS would either ignore it or ostentatiously ignore it, far from giving it a long review. So I naturally was curious. The review is excellent. It's beautifully written. I don't agree with a lot of it, but I want to read a bit of it to you here. First, Patricia Williams summarizes a bit of the book. I want to go over that for you. His latest, she calls it a rehash, Facing Reality, drops into the conversation at a particularly flammable moment. In brief, the American reality Murray presents is a construct of race as a category of unyielding genetic difference. A sealed box of capability, disposition, and destiny. You see what I mean? What you might or might not make out of the review, Patricia really sure as hell can write, and it just gets better. The first truth he abstracts from the box is that American whites, blacks, Latinos, and Asians, as groups, have different means and distributions of cognitive ability. That'll be familiar if any of you are familiar with this author's work. The second truth is that the American whites, blacks, Latinos, and Asians, as groups, have different rates of violent crime. And Murray says in interviews and think pieces and journal entries and whatnot, he stresses that he is taking into account differences in population density. That he says he's even taking into account economic differences. He says even when you factor in all the mitigating factors, the numbers are still uneven. And that therefore he believes the mitigating factors aren't ultimately important. Murray claims that the numbers show, she puts that in quotes because he uses that a lot, that those of African descent are biologically less intelligent than whites and more prone to violence. The numbers show, he insists, that such predispositions are unaffected to any significant degree by environment or nurture. Thus, he argues, it is a waste of time and money to be concerned by racial disparities in our societies because unequal social outcomes are attributable to immutable difference. I want to stress here, not only that Patricia Williams can write, I think she and I would probably, I don't agree with every tactic that she uses in this review, but it's very long, so I was bound to disagree with some of them, but I get the impression that she and I could have a humdinger of a conversation over wine and calzones right here. So, but I not only want to stress that, I want to stress also, just from a professional level, this is vital if you're going to write a long piece like this. it's vital that you put your own feelings aside long enough to do justice to the argument being put forward in the book. And that's what happens here. A less disciplined, a less professional writer would have launched off right away. You can tell that Williams is angry here, but that summary, I don't think even Williams would, Charles Murray would disagree with it. She goes on, Murray's work is not really about biology and does not withstand scrutiny as such. His adventure began as an attack on the post-civil rights era remedy of what he calls aggressive affirmative action in the U.S., and his persistent aim has been to devalue inclusion of African Americans in mainstream American society, whether in higher education, the professions, or government service. His ideas have also been underwritten and promoted by right-wing and ultra-libertarian foundations such as the Manhattan Institute and the American Enterprise Institute and the Hoover Institution, which generally advocate shrinking all public spending, including in education. But Murray is not largely concerned with belt-tightening. He is specifically intent on proving differences between those received as white in American society and those perceived to be black. In some of his books, he ranks Jews, women, and, quote, model minorities as well. But there is always a singular drumbeat that African Americans suffer from mental deficiencies that simply can't be fixed. Be nice on an individual basis, he says, but collectively they are different. Moreover, Murray's analyses do not merely presuppose white superiority and black inferiority as standalones. The two are positioned in a zero-sum relation to each other. Now, this is where a bit of disagreement creeps in. If the TLS is giving you this much space to write about a deeply objectionable book, a controversial book, I think you should be a little bit more careful steel-manning its arguments. And some of the statements in this second paragraph, Murray would object to. The devaluing part, unless you're going to make the case, and Patricia Williams probably could, and she might be right to make it, that it is the ultimate act of devaluing to say that a certain segment of society is just mentally inferior. I want to point out here, I know this is a touchy subject, none of you were touched, because we could talk to each other, good God, I don't know why this happened on YouTube, and I don't know why YouTube continues to allow it, especially since I don't monetize this channel. They're not getting anything out of it. Nevertheless, we can bring this up, and I can hear all sorts of disagreement. One of the points that I always want to bring up to Murray is that the etiology, the origin of this theory of yours, doesn't seem to take into account that we're all Africans. Humans evolved in Africa. Modern humans, the modern species evolved in Africa. The races are a reflection of the angle of the sun on your skin. And therefore the generational importance of how much or how little melanin you produce, your body produces. But that's it. That's pretty much it. It's one species. And it all originated in the same place, under the same environmental pressures. And there has not been enough time to account for any kind of... You get this kind of race reality talk a lot on the alt-right end of the spectrum, on the alt-right spectrum that is all over YouTube. It's not all over YouTube as much as it once was. But it was just a couple of years ago that Dave Rubin, who is a darling of the commentariat on a certain end of the ideological spectrum on YouTube, could have Stefan Molyneux on his channel on YouTube, fully monetized, not shadow banned, not anything like that, where Molyneux just matter-of-factly says, so Rubin is sitting there, the usual, slack-jawed moron, sitting there saying, so what you're saying is that black people's brains, and Molyneux finished for him and said, are smaller, yes. No pushback from Rubin at all. At the time, no pushback from YouTube, but I always want to point that out. This is, a lot of Murray's comments seem to act like modern humans emerged in many different places on Earth. Modern humans did not emerge in Europe. Modern humans emerged in Africa. Anyway, then, by the time I got to this point, I could tell in this review that Patricia Williams hated this book, that she hates Charles Murray, that she hates everything he stands for, that she hates everything that his books have sparked in society, the legitimization of this kind of blatant racism. And by this point, I was asking myself, when I was reading the review, okay, well then why are you reviewing this? You have to know, it's the lead-off 4,000-word review in the primary literary journal in the English-speaking world. Why are you reviewing this if you hate it this much, if you think it's this bankrupt? If the TLS editorial board says, well, we don't want to just ignore it. There are lots of people who are going to pay attention to it, maybe in the wrong parts of society, but nevertheless, we don't want to just ignore it on ideological grounds. Well, the TLS has a feature in the back, an in-brief feature, where they give you 500 words to write a review of a book. You could easily have stuck it there and gotten somebody to review it. And Patricia Williams addresses this. When I was first asked to write this review, I declined. Yes, indeed. I was reminded of Bertrand Russell's eloquent response to an invitation to debate Oswald Mosley, the founder of the British Union of Fascists. I want to quote Russell here because it's always a treat to quote Russell in any way. Just imagine it. If you ever heard, there's audio of him on YouTube. If you ever heard his voice, I can't possibly imitate a British accent quite so Olympian as his. But he writes to Oswald Mosley, "It is not that I take exception to the general points made by you that every ounce of my energy has been devoted to an active opposition to cruel bigotry, compulsive violence, and the sadistic persecution which has characterized the philosophy and practice of fascism." I might point out there, cruel bigotry, compulsive violence, sadistic persecution. Bertrand Russell is saying that those are fundamental characteristics of fascism. I might take a brief glance at American history in the last 6 years, see if rings any bells, seem any similar in any way to anything that might come to mind. But anyway, I feel obliged to say that the emotional universes we inhabit are so distinct and in deepest ways opposed that nothing fruitful or sincere could ever emerge from association between us. It is not out of any attempt to be rude that I say this, but because of all that I value in human experience and human achievement. Of course, that is the ultimate way of being rude. You're saying everything I value in human experience and human achievement is violated by your very existence on Earth. That you don't get much more rude than that. I thought, okay, but why would you quote that when you're quoting Bertrand Russell declining to do the very thing you're doing? Why would you think about that? So we'll read just a bit more, and then I'll go on to the box. I know you want to know what's in the box. So I thought, too, of the Princeton genomics professor David Botstein's denunciation of the bell curve, that's Murray's famous book, as, quote, so stupid that it is not rebuttable. To decline seemed the better path to sanity. Okay, I have seen both. I have seen people, when the bell curve came out, oh my God, the storm that it elicited in my professional world. I wasn't in that world at the time. I would certainly have been part of that world. But the storm that book elicited. And it split down the middle between people saying something like Botstein's comment, where this is so dumb, so blatantly offensive, that there's no way to talk about it. And other people trying to rebut it. Trying to go to studies and statistically, population-wise, rebut Murray's arguments. That one of Murray's arguments has always been in interviews. In person, he's actually a fairly nice-seeming guy. Maybe that makes him all the more malevolent in the eyes of some. But a comment of his has always been, we study the effects of every kind of variable on every kind of human trait. We say, what does your environment do to your bone structure? What does it do to your skin tone? What does it do to your likelihood of social or economic mobility? Where you are and what you are. We study the interaction of all of those things. What does nutrition do? What does proper exercise do? What does a single mother or single father do? We study the impact of all of that stuff across a huge variety of study models with tons of peer review. But there's one thing we're not allowed to study. Is it possible that your skin color is correlative in any way with your general purpose IQ, as measured over years, as measured in neutral settings? He maintains that neutral settings are entirely possible to do, that you can strain out any kind of cultural difference. And that one of his points in conversation is, doesn't it raise a red flag with you, no matter how touchy you think the subject is, no matter how sure you are that it borders on something deeply offensive? Doesn't it raise a red flag with you that we're saying you can study everything else except this? Is it possible that we talk about how different skin colors, different races, if we want to call it that, just as long as we're all on the same page, it's the same species. We talk about how different races can have different susceptibility to certain diseases, can have different strength and certain blood makeup, can have different longevity. different across the board, different sibling relations across the board. But there's one category we can't talk about, can't mention it at all. And his point when he brings that up in that way is that this is social control. That's the reason you can't bring it up, and that's wrong. There are not to be areas where you can't go. And he says that if you go into the limited amount of research, actual quantitative peer-reviewed research has been done in that area, you can't rebut his book, The Bell Curve, or any of his other later contentions. He says, I have gone into that data. There's not much of it, but what there is gives points in an absolutely indisputable direction. So you have to wonder. Anyway, let's see what Patricia Williams has to say, how she has to justify herself, because she's saying to decline seemed the better path of sanity. And she goes on a digression here, but then she gets, I decided to write this review because today the U.S. is close to a kind of free enterprise civil war. That is a brilliant phrase. I don't think I've ever heard it before. Free enterprise civil war is a brilliant description of what's going on in America, in which the very definition of criminality has been raced, as in the casually reiterated defamation that, quote, blacks commit all the crimes. This assertion often contrasts with wild rationalizations about the broad range of white criminality. According to a recent Reuters poll, for example, nearly half of Republicans believe that the attack on the Capitol was, quote, largely a nonviolent protest or the handiwork of left-wing activists trying to make Trump look bad. So the gist here is that Patricia Williams chose to review this book in order to speak up against it. That having such a prominent venue as the TLS is important enough to overcome her distaste at writing about it at all and noticing it at all. And the review is fascinating. I don't know if it's online. It's their long lead piece for this issue, so it might not be free. It might be behind a paywall on the TLS website. But I urge you to read it. It's well worth your time to read. It raises very important points, but I think entirely in Patricia Williams' favor. Reviewers should do this. It shouldn't. The easiest decision in the world in her conversation with her editor would have been, I don't want to do this, and believe me, you don't want to do this either. Don't take my refusal and go find somebody else. The TLS ought not to give this its attention. And her decision, you've got the two sides of the question. You either say that is a decision of, in my opinion, most editors today on any kind of controversial book. They just say, I'd rather not. Don't want to court the controversy. If you can't praise it, then we don't want to devote space to it. Or if we're going to get hate mail, then we don't want to devote space to it. The TLS obviously went in the other direction. They said this is important enough so that we should kick it around the block. We should take it out and shoot it. We should execute it publicly. You see that kind of thing a lot, that divide a lot about what to do about obviously unsavory ideas and concepts. I love seeing it in the TLS, so I wanted to bring it to your attention. But there's the box. Well, there's also a box. I know what this is. It's not a book, but it's book-related. Hi, Bean. Oh, the Bean is not happy. It is very hot. Oh, my. I know. She's lethargic, and I don't have the heart to tell her what tomorrow's going to be like. Oh, you so baby. Hi, baby. How are you, baby? Oh. What's in here? Is it a puppy? Am I getting a puppy? Is there a puppy in this box? Some of you are probably going to yell at me about this. I want to stress that I can quit anytime I want. But we're going to do a tech unboxing. We're going to do a tech unboxing on this channel. And there's pressure involved, peer pressure involved, from another BookTuber. Yes, baby. Mark, at Book Time with Elvis. Elvis is in hardly any of his videos. You're in every one of my videos. Recently on one of his videos, I'll leave a link to it if I can find it, Mark, at Book Time with Elvis, held up an electronic device. That is never a good idea to do when Steve is watching, because I experience FOMO in only one area, and that is electronic devices. I look at an electronic device, somebody's battered old electronic device, and a battered old cover, and I think, ooh, could this be the device of my dreams? So I left a comment and asked Mark what that device was, and he told me what it was. He told me what it was in a comment, incompletely. He had to have the thing right in front of him when he identified it, but I figured out what it was, and I researched it. And I immediately realized I had to have one, and it is this. It is a yoga smart tab from Lenovo. Some of you who go way back on this channel will remember that this is not my first Lenovo product. I got a Lenovo yoga book. They're keeping the yoga name here. I know I'm not doing this correctly. In an actual fetishistic, pornographic YouTube unboxing, I'm supposed to show you every detail of my movements here. I'm supposed to put the camera up above, pointing straight down at the table, and just lovingly unbox. I don't know why unboxings are like that, unless it's that a lot of people just use them vicariously because they're not going to buy the tech themselves, so they want every kind of thrill of getting it in the mail, opening it, that sort of thing. Some of you may remember that I had a yoga book from Lenovo. I actually fell in love with the idea of the yoga book so much that I got it when it was still experimental. It was still first generation technology. In fact, I got on a waiting list for it. It wasn't even available in stores or on the Lenovo website. This was a long time ago, 10 years ago, maybe more than that. 5 years ago, 6, well, however long it was. You'd have to look up the Lenovo yoga book, first generation. The yoga book was a great idea. I loved the idea of it. It was just 2 panels with a really high quality, heavy duty hinge. No keys, just 2 panels. And one of the panels, once you turned it on, had a haptic sensor, flat sort of iPad keyboard, but significantly better with the sensor arrangement than the iPad on-screen keyboard. And that was your keyboard. There weren't any keys to pop off. There was no technology, no place where crumbs could go. It was just 2 slabs together on an angle. And I had nothing but problems with the yoga book. I still have it, but I never use it anymore. I had nothing but problems with it. At one point, I had to call a tech line and get a tech person to I gave them remote access to my desktop. So I was on the phone with the woman, and I was watching her do things on my desktop to get the desktop to work. And she did, but it always felt buggy. It was a lesson I learned that I should never get brand new technology. Not me, I'm not techie enough to do it. The Yoga Smart Tab is not brand new technology, but a couple of the features in it, oh my, oh my. Mark mentioned them in passing, and then I went and watched a whole bunch of, is this taped close? It is. I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos, and everybody was commenting on these same features. I'll show you the features. This is a tablet, so it's the same thing as the iPads that I have, the same thing as my Lenovo Yoga Book. I could power up the Yoga Book and use it simply as a tablet. Okay, we're going to open the box here. There you go. And this is what we get. There's the device, and then you pop the device out. The tech channels always put it aside for a minute. You pop the device out, and you look at the rest of the box. So this little box is the power cord and adapter. This is a USB-C, I think. It's all compartmentalized. So, what have we got here for the power? Yes, there we go. So it's that for the power brick here. I doubt this device will have any power in it, but I will use this to power it up. I will try to keep my hands off it until then. And then in the other box here, we have standard warranties and a guidebook in multiple languages. I'm probably going to need this thing because I don't know a whole lot about this device. So you have to put everything back where you found it. This is what the tech channels do because they want you to feel like you're getting this device. So they don't want to just show it to you bald. They want you to feel like you're getting it, so that because they know you're not going to. They've got a freebie from the manufacturer. I did not. Needless to say, I got mine by going onto eBay. And then we get to the device itself. Lightweight, small. Use the tab here to pull this covering off. Ooh, ah, oh. Oh my. Okay, there is the Yoga Smart Tab. There's the back and there's the front. So the back is plastic, but fairly heavy duty, and then there's the front with these Lenovo stickers on it that you can take off. And two of the features that are kind of interesting about this thing. One, as you're going to notice right away, is that the battery for the thing is this handle. So this is not a flat tablet like you would ordinarily have with an iPad. See, it's got a handle there. And built into the handle are two things that are other distinctive features. One is the speakers. One speaker there, and then one speaker all the way over there. So they're far enough away so you're going to get genuine stereo sound. And unlike most tablets, or laptops for that matter, the speakers are not pointing directly into your lap, which is a great relief. I went through the 90s, thank you very much, so I've already done my time having InSync blasted into my crotch. I don't have to have that happen again. These speakers you speak out into the air, and they speak in different directions. So that's one neat feature. And the other neat feature, you already saw it when I held this up here, is this thing here. You press this button and you get a stand that has a couple of different, this is a very strong hinge. You can do that, you can do this, or you can do this to hang this device. So if you wanted to, you could put this on a wall in a kitchen or something like that. And this also allows you, if you want to prop this up at an angle and use the virtual keyboard on the tablet as a keyboard to work on. So you don't have to sit there, with it flat on the table. This won't sit flat on the table. It's got a bump on the side. You've got what have you got here? The volume, power, a little LED. You've got the headphone jack. I'm not sure if this takes any external storage. Does this take? Oh no, I think it's on the back that it does. The back has this little window right here is for a card. Put a SIM card in there, I think. I don't know what that would do. Could I actually use this thing as a phone? I'm not sure that I could. I'm blanking now off the top of my head on whether or not this does have external storage. Any kind of external storage. Bottom, just the LED, nothing there. That's for the power cord. You might not be able to expand the storage on this thing. I'll have to ask Mark, although he might not know. He might not know with his own device. Or it could be that there's some sort of solution that'll work just fine for that card slot right there. You might be able to expand storage there. And that, in case you didn't notice, that is also the camera for this thing. A little oddly positioned. And certainly the ergonomics are against it, but I think it has a crappy camera, so it's not going to matter. But this has, the stand will work for you to just set this up and have it playing on a table or a countertop while you're doing something else. And it'll also work to facilitate a keyboard, and it snaps right up out of place, right up out of the way. So those are two of the things. All the rest of it is internal. It's a fairly strong internals here, at least for my use. This is primarily a what's called a content consumption device, so you're not going to be doing any heavy gaming or anything like this. But it comes with the Google Play Store, if I remember correctly, so it will serve my needs. It will download the Nook app, the Amazon app. It'll download OpenOffice, Chrome, Google Chrome. It'll download all of that. So there you go. I think when Mark held his up, he had a case for his. I have sort of fallen out of love with having cases for any of my technology. I just tend not to do it. So I will probably leave this the way it is. So we have a new piece of technology that I'm going to be playing with. I'm going to charge it up. I will charge it up all afternoon. Let's see, is this the charging port? It's got to be. Yes. Okay. I'll charge it up all afternoon to full power. I don't have a socket right here, so I don't know if this has any power on it, but I doubt it. I'll charge it up, and then I will peel off the stickers and dig in to the operations, get it all set up, install Chrome, and get everything up and running, so that it's not bothering me with any kind of technology. and then I will see what I will see. I now have a tablet with a handle, and the handle has a stand. That's kind of neat. You've seen on this channel many times where I'm fumbling with tablets that are doing stuff I don't want because my finger has migrated onto the screen. This has a handle, and the handle is so placed that your finger is not going to extend past the bezel on the screen itself. So there you go. More tech. The Yoga Smart Tab. Solely because Mark made me do it. so that is... I will put the box aside. I'm really doubting that I will need this box again, but I'll put the boxes aside. I still have a kind of 20th century phobia about throwing away packaging. You always used to hold on to it religiously. Me, Saint Ma used to say, don't ever throw away a package. You never know when you're going to need it. But I tend not to. I would never bother to return this. It wasn't expensive enough. So there you go. Pretty new tablet. We'll see what kind of a toy it is. That plus my Kindle Oasis. One of you sent me a Kindle Oasis. I have been loving my Kindle Oasis. Absolutely loving it. Is, I think, the limit of my tech buying for the rest of the year. We're now in August. That is well past the halfway point of the year. Thinking I'm going to go the rest of 2021 without buying any tech at all. Don't hold me to that, but I'm pretty sure that I am. I think this was the last and biggest whim that I will indulge in. So anyway, that is the video for today. Non-bookish mail. Let's hope it's not a trend. But I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.